Hey, Bay. Today we're looking at day 10 in Advent of Code, cathode-ray tube. We've managed to get out of a river and found another device that doesn't really work. Seems to be a common theme. It gives us these instructions where Noop just advances the cycle of the clock. This thing works on a clock that will be incrementing with a loop. And then we also get these add x3 and add x -5, which updates or adds to an x register, we call it. And so part one of the problem gives us all this stuff. We're looking for a signal strength, which is the register X value times this signal of interest. These are the signals of interest right here, and it wants to know what the sum of these signal strengths are. So let's have a look at the code. For part one, we'll start by importing this read file sync function from the file system, and we'll read our input file that looks like this. Okay, we're going to split that into rows using the file.split, and we'll give that a delimiter of the new line character. Now we're going to define some variables that we're going to update throughout our loop. So x is that x register. It starts with a value of 1 that is given in the problem. We're going to start the cycle at 1 as well. And row number is 0, and is executing is false at the moment. Now, these are the cycles of interest, 20, 60, 100, 140, 180, and 220. These will come into use just in a minute as we're incrementing our cycle each step. Then we'll check if that cycle exists in this array. We're also going to define signal sum equal to 0. This is actually what we're going to return at the end to show what we got. Let's define a function called getSignalStrength. All this does is take in a cycle and x register, which are both numbers, and return a number. They're just multiplied by each other, so pretty simple there. Let's continue on. Define a while loop, and we want to go while we still have an instruction to read. So that's rows.length there is the length of all these things here. We're going to destructure first and second off of the rows.split. So first will be the instruction, and second will be the value. This is just some debug that I have here. So first thing we want to do is if our cycle exists in cycles of interest, so if we're on, say, cycle 20, then we want to do some logic here, which is calculate the signal strength. So we'll get the signal strength using that getSignalStrength function, and we will add it to our signal strength or our signal sum tracking variable. Okay, now for the logic within the loop, we want to know if we're in execution mode, then we have to add that value to the X register. We want to reset the toggle and advance to the next instruction. So we have just a conditional if statement here. If we are executing, remember is executing is just a Boolean, then we're going to add that value of second to register X. We're going to set is executing to false, and we're going to advance row num so we move to the next instruction. Otherwise, we want to advance to the next instruction on Noop. So that really doesn't do anything except advance our row. And we'll also check if then we get an addX instruction that we set is executing to true. And then we're going to increment cycle and drop back into the loop. So basically the loop does something depending on if we're executing or not, and depending on if we're at a signal of interest. Now all we're going to do is console log that signal sum to get our answer. Let me clear. And we get 17,180. Come back to Advent of Code. 17,180 is indeed the correct answer. Now part 2 gets a little bit more complicated. We're essentially drawing to like a LCD screen. And the X register represents a sprite position that we're going to draw. I'm not going to read through the whole thing for you, but what we need to do is, so like we have the X register at the position, and then each cycle it decides whether to draw this pound symbol or a dot, depending on if the X register is there or not. So let's explain it by looking at the code. I'm going to go into a different file this time. And we're just going to do the same thing that we did before. This is all the same. You'll notice I am defining an empty array called CRT. And this is where I'm going to store all those characters. We're going to destructure off first and second again. This is all the same. If we're executing, then we add to the X register. Otherwise, we check our instructions and perform stuff based on that. So again, that's all the same. Now, the main thing that changes about this loop when we're in part 2 is we want to define the pixel positions of the register. So we know that register range are 3 values. Basically, it's x, x plus 1, and x minus 1. And now, having that register range, we want to know if our cycle is within that range. And the other thing to note is that the register assumes one line. If we go back to Advent of Code, it basically says somewhere in here, it says like, yeah, there's no such thing as vertical position. The sprite horizontal position puts this picture where the CRT is currently drawing. Those pixels will be drawn. So all that's really saying is we need to use the modulus operator 40, and we'll push the pound sign in that case. Otherwise, we will push the period. And then we're going to increment cycle just like we did before. And we've built that CRT array having gone through all the instructions. Now we just need to render it out as a string so that we can provide the answer to Advent of Code. So I define this function called writeScreen, and that's just going to loop through every cycle. And if we're at a cycle mod 40 where it equals 0, then we're going to add a new line character and then append the ith character of CRT. Otherwise, we're just going to add the ith character of CRT. And then I will call that function so that it updates this string, and I'll console log that. So let's go ahead and run this. And this is what I get here. It's basically REHPRLU. And then what is this? A B. I'm off by 1 here, and I have this undefined, but it's close enough that I was able to put it in to the instructions here, or the answer key here, and got the right answer. So that's been day 10. Stay tuned for day 11. Thank you for watching. If it helps, please subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah.